Good morning, ma'am. I have selected the topic critically analyze before the law by Franz Kafka. Over half a century ago, Franz Kafka wrote a parable entitled Before the Law. The parable is a brief allegory, the narrative of which is simplicity itself. It lends itself, however, to innumerable adaptations, and he said, among other things, to describe the American system of law so well that it is hard to understand why it is not given more recognition in legal writings. This lack of recognition is especially puzzling in light of the fact that Kafka himself was a lawyer. While Kafka's own dialogue, dialogistic analysis of the parable is certainly entertaining, provocative, and fascinating in its own right, it falls short of being enlightening. Such was probably the intent, and such being the case, it is not surprising to find the numerous scholars have taken upon themselves the task of analyzing before the law for its extensions and adaptations to the times in which they were writing. It has been said of the doorkeeper that his character was a direct play of the bearded, grim looking, heavily cloaked doorman with pointed hats who stood watch with gold headed pikes at the great doors of the palaces of Prague, aristocrats from whose inner recesses an indelibly bright splendor shone forth regarding the man from the country. It has been pointed out that certain translations of this phrase with which Kafka would have been very familiar evoke the nickname for an ignoramus. Thus, some of the parable's imagery and language probably stems from recollections and study from Kafka's younger years. However, there is obviously much more to the parable than a clever narrative concocted from childhood memories. It must have a deeper meaning. It is also right for Kafka's man to get lost in the labyrinth of his own internal and external institutions. But members of the legal profession dare not let be their faith, as has been pointed out by one interpreter of Kafka. Anyone who has never had to struggle with his own problems can comprehend Kafka only superficially and not basically. The student of law and justice must strive that basic understanding. Most commentators who have sought a basic understanding of before the law have understandably focused on the metaphorical aspects of the man from the country, the doorkeeper and the door to the law in an effort to analyze the essence of the parable to some similar situation in life, a question that crops up time and again is whether the man from the country could have done anything to obtain admittance to the law. One commentator has stated unequivocally the answer must be a firm no. Some analysts tend to view the parable rather fatalistically. The parable does not allow any moralizing about it. It simply confirms the incompatibility between the law and human consciousness. The parable's main literacy appearance in the trial. Kafka's classic novel about a man whose dilemma in life is what he has been arrested but is unable to determine the crime with which he is charged. The story is told by a priest to Joseph K., the novel's main character, in a cathedral, in a cathedral into which K has wandered while waiting for a foreign dignitary to whom he was to give a tour of the cathedral. Upon encountering the priest, Joseph learns that the priest knows his predestination only too well. Realizing the depths to which the priest's rendition of the parable, after the story is told, the priest and Joseph engage in a lengthy dialogue in which a lengthy dialogue in which the legend is discussed from various angles, with the priest emphasizing the views of various unnamed commentators of the scriptures, but all the important questions are left unanswered. Was the doorkeeper deceiving the man, or was the doorkeeper himself deceived? Was the doorkeeper appointed to his past from inside the law, in which case he would have some knowledge of the inside, or by a voice calling from within? Are the statements that the doorkeeper cannot admit the man and the door was intended only for the man contradictory or reconcilable? If the door to the law remains open, as is stated clearly in the parable, then what authority does the doorkeeper have to state at the end that he is going to close it after the dialogue has run its course? Joseph's attitude is reminiscent of that of a first year law student emerging from his first classroom recitation, a recent law school graduate after the bar examination, or perhaps a lawyer at the end of a grueling jury trial or appellate argument. In the dialogue following the parable in the trial, the priest singles out two important aspects of the story: the doorkeeper's repeated statements that the man cannot be admitted to the law, and the ultimate assertion that the door was intended only for the man. Here it has been said the doorkeeper is speaking in the character of the Church of Calvin, with its emphasis on man's eternal election by God, but his inability to procure salvation by any activity of his own, and the final uncertainty as to whether he is really saved. This assertion is consistent with a more recent critic when construes the door to the law to be the door leading into heaven and the doorkeeper to be the representative of modern bureaucracy. Proponents, proponents of religious and bureaucratic of the tale tend to suppose that courageous disregard of the doorkeeper would have been the liberating act which would have carried the man to the Shining Palace, expressing a popular viewpoint regarding most of Kafka's work. One commentator has concluded that in the magnificent Before the Law by Kafka leaves us with a number of possible interpretations and no means of knowing which is the correct one. Surely most lawyers would disagree with the pessimist's assertions that interpretation is impossible, but exception should also be taken to the guarded optimism of the views that there are no means of knowing which of several possible interpretations is correct. If analogy to a particular set of facts yields a construction that is sufficient for the interpreter's purpose, and a different fact pattern evokes a slightly altered construction, it does not necessarily follow that one or the other is incorrect. After all, on an abstract level, every person has a door to the law. To extend this, Dan le Froe, and if he neglects or gambles his entrance away, no recovery is possible. Perhaps it is true that the parable is merely illustrative of a method by which Kafka was wont to illuminate the things about him, a method which consists of a slowly growing stock of information followed by brilliant flashes of allegorical insight, a method not all dissimilar to the methods used in American courtrooms. What then is incorrect with constructing the parable to be a poignant commentary on the remoteness of the common man from that governing entity may be? Such an analysis, though subject to disagreement by some, is surely not incorrect. It has been suggested that the man from the country might have fared better with the doorkeeper if he had brought a lawyer with him, but it has also been speculated that perhaps the man's purpose in coming to the door of the law in the first place was to find a lawyer. Like so many concepts in legal literature, Kafka's parable simply cannot be colored black or white. It is written in a hazy shade of grey. If it may be interpreted one way for a given set of facts and a different way for another, then it has a trait that is characteristic of numerous cases and statutes that fill the law books. Another, like those cases and statutes, flexibility does not necessarily render a particular construction incorrect. The doorkeeper can be literally picture of the doorman in Prague, conscience, and the mentor of responsibility, the essence of modern bureaucracy, the mouthpiece of the Calvinist church, and a gatekeeper at the entrance to heaven. All at the same time, the parable itself can symbolically express the situation of a modern man before the law. demonstrate what is possible in the way of cruelty when form is idealized to the detriment of spirit, and sum up to seeming impenetrability of the world's laws, and still not admit of an incorrect interpretation. It is interesting to analyze before the law in the context of the legal profession today. It is especially challenging to do so, examining the identity and authority of the doorkeeper in various analogies, the process by which one enters the legal profession is filled with obvious parallels. The law and the legal profession, the man from the country and the candidate for admission to the bar, the doorkeeper and the bar examines. A cursory examination of this analogy might tempt one to conclude that the parable serves as a didactic way of illustrating what might happen to the law school graduate who does not sufficiently prepare for the bar exam. But a close examination of the parable reveals that the analogy of the doorkeeper to the bar examiner fails at a crucial point. The doorkeeper exerted authority is greater than the bar examiner purports to possess. The doorkeeper has apparent authority to prevent the man from gaining access to the law through a door which the doorkeeper himself knows is intended for the man. The bar examiner's authority to deny one's admission to the bar ends where the demonstrated entitlement of the candidate begins. This is to say that theoretically, at least unsuccessful examinees, by their failure to pass the bar exam, indicate that they are not truly entitled to admission to the bar at that time. This breakdown in the doorkeeper bar examiner analogy leads to analytical difficulties with the analogy of the man from the country to the recent law graduate. Two major snags appear and they are not unrelated. The first is the man from the country is completely ignorant regarding the station and authority of the doorkeeper. Second, he is although equipped with many things for his journey, woefully unknowledgeable about what is necessary for gaining entrance into the law. The bar applicant, however, has previous knowledge about the bar examiner and what is necessary for gaining admittance to the bar. It is lack of prior knowledge, which presumably could have been acquired by some sort of threshold preparation that prevents the man from the country from capitalizing on his basic right to have access to the law through the door intended for him. In summary, and the risk of demonstrating the circular nature of such analysis, the man, though basically entitled to entrance through the door, is not really entitled because he was not sufficiently prepared to capitalize upon his basic entitlement. He is indeed an ignoramus for the reason that he cannot secure for himself that which is meant for him. His tragic flaws leads to a pitiable existence. For the bar applicant, however, preparation and entitlement are closely intertwined and related to each other. There can be no basic entitlement without adequate preparation, and when entitlement is lacking for whatever reason, the message of non-entitlement is not delivered by a lowly doorkeeper. Thus, it may be seen that this two-pronged concept of entitlement and preparation expands the adaptability of the parable to areas that the threshold of the legal profession, both prospectively and retrospectively. And although the preceding example sufficiently conveys the lesson that one should not allow himself to be alike the man from the country, a key to determining just for this lesson means lies in identifying the doorkeeper. In that regard, other examples are helpful. Consider a lawyer whose goal is to obtain the best result for his client in a trial Adequate preparation will generally disclose the result to which the client and lawyer are entitled. The process of adequate preparation will leave in the wake all doorkeepers with ostensible authority to preclude the appropriate result. According to the rules of the profession, of which he was well aware from the outset, true entitlement was lacking. In the eyes of the judge or jury entities with far greater authority than a doorkeeper, in the quest for the identity and authority of the doorkeeper, it is important to note that in the foregoing examples he has not metaphorically representative of the bar examiner, the dean of admissions, and the judge or jury, for they can only deny admittance to those who, according to the rules of which all potential entrants are aware, are not entitled. The doorkeeper in the parable asserted authority or power or deny access to that to which he knew the man to be entitled. In the situation described in the foregoing examples, one who is adequately prepared at each stage for his journey should never come face to face with a doorkeeper. Although it has been said, perhaps accurately, that the man from the country decided not to decide, it was his lack of knowledge or awareness of the rules that led to this decision. And while the contention that some type of disregard for the doorkeeper or ostensible authority was the man's only hope for salvation may some merit, such boldness is not likely to be demonstrated by one who has not sufficiently prepared himself for all that he may encounter on such a sojourn. Had the man from the country been adequately prepared, he would have never encountered the doorkeeper, who would have been left behind at an earlier stage unrecognized. In terms of the man's entitlement, the only thing lacking is some fleeting aspect of preparation that one hand is somehow related to the doorkeeper's identity, but on the other hand, if present, would have obviated the encounter with the doorkeeper altogether. The close link between the missing element of preparation and the doorkeeper identity is key to the discovery of the doorkeeper's authority, and the doorkeeper's actual authority is key to a determination of his identity. He is an entity that persons should never meet if they are adequately prepared for the achievement of goals to which they are basically entitled. He is the spirit of the adversary, but not the adversary himself. He is the intangible extension of self that allows one to be prepared for things to which he is entitled. He is as strong as the unprepared persons all him to become. To the prepared person, however, the doorkeeper is no more than an obstacle to be hurdled without a second thought in the routine process of preparation. He is but a mere functionary who can and will possess only so much authority as one allows him to assume. One should never have to stop so low as to negotiate with him, let alone the fleas in his collar. The persons who finds himself face to face with a doorkeeper exerting authority to prevent his access to that to which he believes himself entitled had best take a second look at the situation. That persons has not adequately prepared. As members of the legal profession and aspirants thereto, we have already encountered the first door to the law, as that aspect of the parable applies to admission to law school or admission to the bar. But as we journey farther along the road to other goals, we must remember the lesson taught by Kafka's parable, with regard to each individual goal that we may have, there is a door to the law and a series of grim looking doormen who, from hall to hall, stand at every door, one powerful than the other, adequate preparation for the particular goal, whether it be jury verdict, a favorable property settlement, an acquittal, election to a judgeship, or whatever, will lead to true entitlement and operate the necessity for any close encounters with intimidating doorkeepers. With this lesson in mind, we can perhaps maintain our practice is indeed our very existence, will inside the doors through which we are entitled to pass and not find ourselves negotiating with a doorkeeper on the threshold before the law. Thank you, ma'am.